Well, the moment we've all been sad to see. A beautiful, beautiful, touching thing to see this kind of go and whatnot, but it's here. It is the closing thoughts. Yep, we are now very much, very much ending off our Danganronpa V3 journey. So, by the time I'm making this, tomorrow, well, yeah, it's the January 11th of 2023. By the time I'm recording this and whatnot, we're going through episodes 84 and 85, and then tomorrow, which is January 12th, will be the final upload of the main story. And from that point on, it's just post-content stuff for this series. And then there'll be this one, the Danganronpa V3 closing thoughts. So, we're here to due to storm, it is time for me to prepare probably the longest Danganronpa V3 closing thoughts, depending on how it's gonna go, because the longest series may probably get, or so far may probably get, the longest closing thoughts. Compared to every other one, you know, like Ultra Disparagles was pretty long, Omori's was pretty long. No More Heroes 2 had a pretty decently long one, same with Danganronpa 2. Danganronpa 1 needs a Redux closing thoughts, I would say. So that's probably in the planning and the making for the time. But I do not know when that'll come around, so be on the lookout for that. Might come next month or some point this year. But yeah, Danganronpa V3. Ladies and gentlemen, we have finally done it through over 100 episodes. Before the 110 mark, we have gotten through every single piece of content that I wanted to show off. And obviously we have our bonus and our closing thoughts that are the concluding factors to the game and whatnot. So, within that, it is time. Ladies and gentlemen, let us start our run through here. So, first things first, because the story and the characters are going to be saved for last and whatnot. The next kind of one is going, I think, starting us off will be the gameplay. The gameplay, and I think also, yeah, kind of like the gameplay, the simple stuff and whatnot that will go off. So yeah, we'll start with that. So the gameplay in this game is quite nice to kind of go through a feel of. Particularly, it's the best kind of aspect compared to all the games and whatnot. So starting off, kind of how you normally are, you have the focus options, the investigations, and whatnot, or just exploring around. Pretty much, the map tells you everywhere to go to with people and whatnot, which is pretty neat and stuff. And you are basically the captain of exploring. When, you know, you're Shuichi at least. Kaede, you're basically exploring the entire where you are and whatnot, what the school has to offer. So yeah, it's pretty cool. The overall control of everything is pretty neat. You can run faster in the courtyard, and so you have your own dormitory, which is nice. This is also probably the biggest area in the area, whatnot, and it has probably the most interesting landscape. While nothing can beat Danganronpa 1 in its atmosphere and whatnot, and its feeling of claustrophobia, and Danganronpa 2 is an entire beach. V3 has you in a dome. It has you in a big dome, which has which is kind of like an upgrade upon what you're going through, and the school is being built at the time. It also introduces the infamous casino that we went to during probably most of this playthrough and whatnot. But overall, kind of the area, in my opinion, is pretty cool. Honestly, I really like this area. And we'll get onto it later, but eventually it coming down is pretty cool too. overall, it doesn't beat Danganronpa 1 in its atmosphere and whatnot, and I think Hope's Peak Academy in general is a really cool area for a killing game and whatnot, even if we don't want said killing games anymore. Well, I don't want it. I don't know the audience, you know. But anyways, so yeah, we have that aspect. Now let's get on to kind of like investigating and whatnot. Pretty much the same deal. Investigating has never really changed and whatnot. The areas and whatnot connected to these investigations are pretty cool because comparatively, like, well, at least each floor has had like a murder and whatnot that's been of suspect. The Library of Rentaro, during the magic show for Ryoma and his lab, which was the floor that we recently got, and the fourth floor with Angie's death and Tenko's death. The third floor is used again within the computer room. There's no use of the fifth floor and whatnot, but eventually we get the same deal with Chapter 5 when we open up a new area and a death is taking place in that new area. They're like usually the simple things and whatnot, all of them taking place in each area as you know we usually get them a lot. Actually no, I was thinking on Dawn of 163, but I remember that is where that first that is where the murders took place. It's in the fourth. No wait, it's Trial 4. That's right. Trial 4. There's no new murder on top of the fourth floor. But yeah. So that is that's basically kind of everything wrong. The investigations are the same. You investigate each missing object. You make sure to check in with everything and whatnot. You inspect every nook and cranny, even the secret ones hidden from you in plain sight. The focus menu is pretty cool, honestly. I think it's probably the best one. I can't remember if the other ones had a focus one, or if they did. I couldn't remember if they had anything new or unique to the focus mode. But overall, pretty neat. If not, then that's pretty cool detail that they added on. Now we got the trials and whatnot. This is where some new stuff obviously comes in that we're checking in. So first of all, we need to start with the non-stop debates. The non-stop debates have been always been the same and whatnot. With the white noise and whatnot, there really is no changes because you know it's just that basic mode. Nothing really neat about it except graphically, it's the best one. I really do like the new add-on and fun they had with this one because it's clear, you know, they've had quite a bit of fun. I think another thing is that's pretty neat in concept. Is I think another thing neat in concept is the lie mechanic. So, yeah, the lie mechanic is underused and whatnot, or at times required, but I think it gives us kind of a showing that with the back doors whatnot, making our character have a little fun or trying to get some words out. Especially Chapter 5, with Shuichi baiting Maki into saying the thing, which I think a lot of people tend to undermine because it's like the lies that Shuichi kind of backs in through and whatnot. It's basically known that he knows what's available on the table. Like he knows what to use and whatnot. So like him using these lies and whatnot to his availability to kind of catch people in the making and whatnot, or adding things on, it's quite neat. Yeah, sure. Like people can, it's understandable that people assume that it's just Shuichi being kind of a mockery idiot, but you know that's not the case with what he actually is. And plus, you don't have to use the back drops or whatnot, or like the back doors or back routes and whatnot. You can just go on telling the truth because it's just kind of what you feel. But the back routes are pretty neat and whatnot with the lie mechanic, and there is still quite a bit of use for it. Other than that, there is the required lies, which you kind of have to kind of try settling the pace or committing things wrong, like how Shuichi has to lie about Tenko's death because people are now on the subject of suicide because of Maki, which, as I point out, doesn't make a lot of sense. So, yeah. So yeah, the lie mechanic, while it can be argued that it's underused, I'm kind of like the devil's advocate on there. I do think it's in between and whatnot, whether it's underused or there's a lot of fun with the lie mechanic. overall, it's a pretty neat concept that was never into the other two games, and yeah, pretty neat, pretty neat. It is perjury because, you know, in a class trial setting, the perjury is basically not allowed. You can't lie and whatnot. But this one, you know, taking hand of the truth versus lies theme and whatnot, or the truth and lies theme, makes a lot of sense for the lies and the truths. I think there's a lot of them in this game. Yeah, so that's a lie mechanic. Now let's go on to the ones that are kind of new or in the subset. Imagination excavation is probably not great. It's not great, or yeah, it's not good and whatnot. You do have to use a lot of brain power and whatnot, and it is pretty simple. But overall, it's like it really does kind of. It's really hard to get those A's and whatnot because imagination excavation is all about, you know, connecting. Is all about like connecting each other to make a bigger piece and whatnot. And it makes sense from there, but it's not really utilized well. I would say it's not very fun, but you know, it's a new mode, and it did bring something new to the table. Um, Psych Taxi is honestly really cool, especially when you get the upgrade. Yes, people do not probably dislike it because it takes long. I don't really care for whether it's long or not. I don't have any problem with that. Sure, the trials may seem bloated and whatnot, but I never really noticed much. Particularly. Aside from Chapter 3 and whatnot, Chapter 4 actually felt quite short to me. And, you know, Chapter 6, because, you know, it's going to be the biggest, it's going to be the longest one. That's been known to our noggins for a while now, since the first one. So yeah, I don't think there's really any problems there. What is it? So yeah, Psych Taxi is Psych Taxi basically this time compared to Logic Dive. Instead, what we do is that we pick up girls. It's a lot easier, but it's also kind of a lot understanding and whatnot. To kind of like bring the viewers on page, because Shuichi probably does know of the stuff compared to us, where we have to kind of catch up because we have to do a lot of brain thinking, just like Shuichi does and whatnot. Same with Kaede, you know, even though we never got to see Kaede's Psych Taxi in the game, whereas that's in the demo, and you know, the demo is kind of whatever. Psych Taxi with Shuichi and whatnot is pretty neat, and like he can get a simple normal yellow car and then go in a huge fucking pitmobile with the upgrade in the casino that just fucking go Mach 10 at some point. So yeah, pretty neat. So now, Psych Taxi basically is simple, and it's like Logic Dive, but I think it's better than Logic Dive overall. So yeah, I respect that. And also the music's funny and cool too. So Psych Taxi, not bad. Can be long, but not bad. So Hangman's Gambit this is the best version of Hangman's Gambit. It actually feels like it's something neat. You still have to figure out like how you would in like normal Hangman, but it's way better than the supremely easy Danganronpa 1 one and the most aggravating one in Danganronpa 2. They finally made a good Hangman's Gambit, and I would be perfectly fine if they worked along with this. Doesn't mean it's great though. Hangman's Gambit's still quite easy, but it works. It functions. It's neat. It seems really well made, and I'm happy for that. Other than that, it's still Hangman's Gambit, and it's decent now. It's actually decent and whatnot, and the changes are great. But yeah, it's just kind of whatever. So yeah, the other thing that's kind of okay. So another thing that's quite neat, I would say, within the class trials is the rebuttal showdowns. The rebuttal showdowns. Okay, let me just say this right now. The rebuttal showdowns in this game are so much better than Danganronpa 2's. Now you have a lot more. You no longer have a blade limit count, and basically with the new V limits and whatnot within the focus, which is pretty cool. It's always satisfying to get that V and whatnot. The rebuttal showdown now just has you on a particular side instead of all of it. But the thing about the side and whatnot is that it seems a lot more simple and whatnot. The controls feel decent and whatnot. I don't think they're as bad as people make them out to be. Either that, they just have a shit controller. I do use mouse though. I did use mouse though for that, so I didn't have too much problems aside from my mouse messing up. Not because of the game, but because my mouse sucks. But yeah, Rebuttal Showdown is not as bad as I think people were to make it out, and it's a lot more funner and whatnot. The music's hype and whatnot, and overall, the Rebuttal Showdown with Shuichi is one of the most somber ones that I've been experienced with. Kind of like Sonya's in Chapter 5 of Danganronpa 2. They're just really somber, and it's really, but it is really enjoyable. And compared to Sonya's whatnot, Shuichi's is like the only one where his Rebuttal Showdown is somewhat right, where you can't really win that one because you just end up going with Shuichi because protecting his powers and whatnot, and because he provided really good points. So yeah, so Rebuttal Showdown better than Danganronpa 2's. I do like the puzzle kind of aspect or the timing aspect of Danganronpa 2's, but it really kind of felt a little annoying when playing through it originally, where Danganronpa V3 is just a lot more smooth and better. So yeah. The next one is the new one, Scrum Debates. Scrum Debates are very easy. They're very easy, but they have the best music. And you can't deny that Scrum Debates has the best music that we've heard. It's a neat concept because it's a split down the middle, something that we never really got to experience much in any others. I feel like this is really neat because it kind of portrays a realistic kind of aspect, whatnot, to get everyone on your side. You just kind of like have to decide on things and whatnot, and it really does help out. So yeah, overall, that's definitely one of the better things. It's very easy. It's pretty short. But it's pretty neat to know that it really kind of tags along some more realistic proportions and whatnot. And it's a neat little game mode. And like I said, Scrum Debate, one of the best music pieces in Danganronpa. What's another thing that I'm missing? Probably. Oh, Argument Armaments. So, Argument Armament continues the usual rhythmic thing, and compared to Danganronpa 2's, which was hype and intense, my UI screen was just completely filled and whatnot, and I couldn't see shit at times. Danganronpa V3 fixes this and whatnot, and they make it a bit more simple. It's also pretty neat. While the music is not great, aside from the final one, the overall it's pretty much a lot better for me to see, and like when the opponent does pull off some shit, you know, to get me distracted or whatnot, you know, it feels better, you know. It like I can still at least see, and focus menu is, or you know, in the fever time, it still works out wonders and stuff. So yeah, I like it. While it's harder to get those timings of things compared to Danganronpa 2 and 1, I still have a pretty enjoyable time with them more than Danganronpa 2, and Danganronpa 1 is just pretty boring. Pretty boring, honestly. But it's whatever. So, the comic book. I like how they kind of go back into a whole Danganronpa 1 kind of thing. Danganronpa 1 and V3s are different, but they have a lot of similarities. Compared to Danganronpa 2, where it was just... It was a pain, needless to say. It made the comic books last longer, and it was not necessary to have that whole change. I get to make a whole difficulty aspect better, but not in a sense where it needs to be long. It's a little annoying. Whereas Danganronpa V3 kind of returns to kind of form within similarities from Danganronpa 1, so it's neat and whatnot. And it's neat, or it's got a really neat little somber-esque music, and like how you have to fit in the pieces before you get the new ones and whatnot, which just works out a lot compared to Danganronpa 1. But Danganronpa 1 might have the best one still, but it's really between Danganronpa 1 and V3's closing argument that really kind of works. And you know, obviously the the declaration of it all is really cool. So yeah, that's that. What else are we missing? I think, is there anything we're missing? So we do the nonsense debates, imaginary excavation, the psych taxi, the hangman's gambit, scrum debates, the line mechanic, argument armament, and the closing things. Whatnot. I think we have all of them. If I missed any, then please point to me. Then maybe I'll discuss it in the comments and whatnot, my opinions on it. But if I did go through it, then do all of it, then don't bother me about it. Alright, so with the gameplay aspect kind of done and whatnot, overall it's had some voting time, but voting time is just, you know, how you usually are with voting time. So yeah. Um, so now we will get probably, or the next thing I think we should understand is the music and whatnot. Danganronpa V3 has the best music, probably. Beautiful Dead is an absolute banger and a jammer and one of the best ones. But this game has a lot of them that are pretty cool. So Beautiful Lie that is playing right now is one of the most somberistic but one of the most beautiful pieces in this series. It really does kind of illustrate kind of what your characters are feeling and whatnot. That was pretty much different from what Danganronpa 1 and 2 are. They both feel like the atmosphere, and Danganronpa 2 has a great track in Beautiful Ruin as well, but does not compare to Beautiful Dead or Beautiful Lie in the series. And Beautiful Dead is just a beautiful, slow, simple, smooth piece in the series, but is more focused on the atmosphere. Beautiful Lie is more focused on what I believe is the characters and whatnot, with the piano playing in Kaede, and a more kind of more somber feeling to it for Shuichi and whatnot. And it's kind of the sense of dread, you know, that you get from playing this, because particularly Danganronpa V3 has a much more different kind of lineage or something to it than the others. Like, it feels like in Danganronpa V3, everything is just out there to hate or just see you kill people, and it really kind of feels, you know, annoying. Like, you want to like not have that, but like Danganronpa V3 really is kind of the whole thing where you don't want to lose your friends and whatnot, culprit or victim. It's really kind of dramatic or melodramatic and whatnot. And overall, like with the melancholy vibes that Beautiful Lie gives and whatnot, it seems quite fitting for like something that would probably be the saddest Danganronpa in the series and whatnot. Depicting how you view it, depending on how you're gonna view each of them and whatnot. It really kind of depends on your subject, because I still don't know whether or not I would consider this the saddest one, but it can definitely provide some arguments and whatnot. I don't know which one I would consider. So aside from that, we also have Class Trial Resurrection Edition, which is the best one of the best class trial themes ever. Same as Scrum Debate, one of the best class trial themes ever. No competition there. And then Hope Searching and Despair Searching. I can't say which one I prefer between Hope Searching or Ikoroshia and whatnot. Those are really good to fight against and whatnot. They're like, it's really interesting. Danganronpa 1's Box 15 is pretty neat and jamming alongside Despair Searching. But Despair Searching probably takes the best one for trial, investigation, and whatnot. You actually feel like, you know, this noir and whatnot, or this detective that you are in Kaede's, to eventually the actual detective Shuichi's shoes and whatnot. So it feels quite nice. It feels quite nice. And Despair Searching is just the best one. But yeah, like I said, I can't decide between Ikoroshia or Hope Searching on which one's the best. The other things that I want to talk about is kind of what is it? The whole kind of like school mode themes and whatnot. There's no new one, which is kind of sad. There's new ones for the Ultimate Talent Development Plan, but no new ones for school mode. What there is though is the final piece and whatnot that you usually hear is, or the final two pieces, which are the credits themes and the epilogue themes. The credits themes for everyone that's not V3 are easily the best. V3 has a good one, but it's a remix, and it's nothing short of it. And overall, it's probably the weakest credits theme. I like it, but I can't even find it, nor do I prefer it to the others. What is now the final theme though? Everyone's Killing Game graduation ceremony. It's either between this one or Goodbye Despair Academy. Between those two, it is hard to decide. They're both such beautiful themes and whatnot, and it really does kind of make it a little sad with how it is. So yeah, with that in mind, let's now move on from the music And anything else? There's not really much in terms of extras, honestly. Like, you have the post-game mode and whatnot, which is pretty cool, which is Ultimate Talent Development Plan, which is a whole new board game kind of thing to it, which is really neat. I do enjoy it. I, however, do think Danganronpa S is a much better rendition of it because it's enhanced and it's a more like deluxe version of it. So like, I can't say this one was great. It's good, but I wouldn't play much of it than I already have now. I didn't play much of it in my first playthrough. I played it through it once with Shuichi. Monokuma's Test is pretty cool and whatnot. It's like a little RPG side scroller thing, and overall they both have their own kind of like games inside and whatnot. So like, it's really up to interpretation because not only is the main story long, but everything about like those post games and whatnot, along with Salmon Team mode and whatnot, they are longer than how we think. Salmon Team mode, probably the best one. There's no building and whatnot, even if I miss the building aspect to it. But it is absolutely, it's really good that like, not only is the free time events, but the date events are much more easier to get finished through and whatnot, and they're pretty cool overall. I think Danganronpa 1 and 2 have more locations, like just by one location, but overall it's pretty neat going in with all these characters who I consider the best cast in the series, which is B3. Um, so yeah. Next up, aside from the post games, which we'll talk about, I think we can talk about them now. But Ultimate Talent Development Plan within the party game aspect is pretty cool. You can get events with friends and whatnot, friendship squares, event squares, talent squares, and strength squares. To level up your characters and whatnot, and to spend time with others, and it's pretty cool. I wish there was more. Luckily, there's a lot more in Danganronpa S and whatnot, but I do wish there was more Ultimate Talent Development Plan. It's neat to seeing the other two cast characters and whatnot in this alternate continuity, or alternate timeline and whatnot, with when there was no killing games, a timeline that Shuichi would love to live in, or that they would all love to live in and whatnot. But yeah, overall, it's kind of just whatever, I would say. It's pretty cool, but I would definitely play Danganronpa S as one over that one. Um, Salmon Team mode, like I said, is the best one. There is no building, the day tickets and the mono emergency stuff, and then you go to casino and whatnot. Pretty cool system that I like, and the love suit to top it off and whatnot. Me still being sad I didn't get Rantaro's on the second recorded playthrough, which is bumming, but it's whatever. The Monokuma test is pretty neat. I do think though that it's kind of boring and whatnot. So yeah, that's kind of like my thoughts on it. Aside from that, yeah. So with all that in hand, we start off the next segment with the story and the characters. So yeah, particularly a lot of the characters in here kind of face a nice character arc, especially Shuichi, Maki, and Himiko. These all receive one, and some also have some starting character arcs, which are pretty neat. Along with Angie's and Tenko's, no, not Gonta, Miyu within some point. Tsumugi's doesn't really have a character development arc until the final chapter. Kipo has kind of a short, or has a simple arc that's not really noticeable, but you can tell within kind of like within the games and whatnot that he's slowly moving on slower and slower. But it's not as much as Shuichi, Maki's, and Himiko's. Kaito and Kokichi are big characters that while don't get too much of an arc, but their flaws are represented and whatnot, and how they really are is kind of represented. Especially Kokichi and whatnot. But overall, they both unfortunately can't survive. Kaito can't survive due to his illness, and Kokichi can't really survive due to the poison that Maki put on him, and the fact that no one really trusts him anymore because he makes it out like that, but also because the mastermind plotted against him after what he did, which was out of her control and whatnot, which was out the team's control. They had no idea he was gonna pull that stuff. So yeah, Kokichi bit the dust because the mastermind pulled was just more steps ahead, and it just sucked. And he had one last gambit that just was unfortunately not into his favor. So his plan didn't go as it went, but eventually it ends, you know, within Shuichi's development and stuff. So now we get on to the the next hand and whatnot, which is, from what I believe, we get on to the story. So starting the story off, we represent Kaede along with her duologist tag partner Shuichi, into which in the prologue we're all in like simple school dress outfits and whatnot. But what Danganronpa V3 starts us out with is that there's no like introductions fully and whatnot. Well, there is introductions, but it's in a weird kind of landscape space. How it starts is way different than the other two Danganronpas. You start out with Kaede and Shuichi Saihara, and you eventually meet the Exosouls, which chases you back to the gym. Eventually, you will get your ultimate wardrobe after meeting the Mono Cubs and whatnot, and you will get this flashback light within that sends you back to where you are, but it totally knocks out your memories of being kidnapped and whatnot, which is pretty weird. But we'll save into detail into that for kind of like the final bits and whatnot. Actually, you know, I might put that into its own video considering the ending and the final trial. That may be a video for another time. I don't know when I'll actually work on it, but that will definitely be something to discuss. But yeah. Anyways, we're back to where we are, and this time instead of going ahead to meeting up in the gym at the start, instead what we do is we go ahead and explore the school, meeting other cast of characters, starting off with Kaede, which is the ultimate pianist, and Shuichi Saihara, which is the new ultimate detective, which has been passed on now out of Kyoko's hands and to Shuichi Saihara. And so, basically our journey starts from there. We meet a lot of the cast representatives, starting off with Tsumugi, you know, Rantaro, Miyu, and such nots, Himiko, and Tenko. So, I will start off with a few characters with kind of the ones that I didn't have much interest in. So, Angie and Miyu. These are the two weakest characters, in my opinion, in this game. That aren't even bad characters. They're just not great characters, in my opinion. So, basically, with how I feel between these two characters is my kind of impressions on them kind of don't fit. So, Atua's whole shtick is that she's a religious con artist and whatnot. That could be the case. That she believes in Atua, which Atua is supposedly a group of religious following and whatnot, or beings and stuff. But Atua doesn't actually kind of exist on its own. Instead, it would be Atua's. So it's believed, it could be good belief and pointers that Atua is just a made-up god in Angie's head. And basically, Angie doesn't have too much of a role in the first chapter until the two next chapters, chapter 2 and chapter 3, which she helps Himiko set up a magic show to kind of cheer the audience and whatnot. Unfortunately, that magic show goes horribly wrong at the expense of Ryoma's life and whatnot. And we have to start our next investigation. The next hand and whatnot is within chapter 3, where she has a much bigger role. With the Necronomicon and whatnot, she starts a student council in belief of Atua with Himiko, Tsumugi, Kibo, and Tenko. And then they pick up Gonta alongside. However, one of them is in fact not an actual real member, as that is Tenko, who just went in within it to basically help try to distance herself closer to Himiko so that she wouldn't lose traction to Himiko. But Angie, you know, starting the student council really kind of makes a lot of bad pointers. Now, yeah, the flashback lights were really there to implant memories in us, but I don't think we should just let it off as knowing that they're bad, because what they did let us kind of do and whatnot is kind of remember points to get us kind of feeling righteous and whatnot. if it's meaningless in the end, I don't think those flashback lights really have anything wrong about them, because while they are meant to implant memories, it seems weird that they would implant memories that are somewhat fake in what sorts, that was actually just off of the mastermind's head, because it's not perfect and whatnot of those memories, as a book kind of proves it wrong. But what's weird about it is that if it's just memories that were kind of fake and instinct and whatnot, why were said such memories basically made into the factor that, like, Samugi Samugi didn't get all the details right and was just a rush, when really it could have taken her a whole day to get it to work out in her thoughts and feelings. It just seems very suspect. Also, a lot of these provide weird insights that we don't get much of. All we're left with is that they're fake and whatnot, as if they're meant to save us for our theory crafting and whatnot, such as in Shuichi meeting the headmaster Makoto Neigi, and the boy that Shuichi meets. That's just it's weird. It's kind of weird. The Gopher Project doesn't make a lot of sense in of its own, so that could be proven false and whatnot, but it could make sense if Shuichi and Makoto did meet in a somewhat thing, because there's not a lot of clues that contradict it, aside from the fact that they're just fake. It just seems weird. Anyways, back to Angie. She breaks a flashback light, which I am basically indifferent to, honestly. I don't know if I fully agree with her plans and whatnot. They're fake and all, but they provided a lot of insight to us and whatnot, to what they needed. Anyways, Angie, anyways, so yeah, Angie also basically shut off the escape manhole to the Death Row Despair, and now she also limits nighttime because murders took place at nighttime. Even though Rentaro's case is more so evening time, so it doesn't make a lot of sense there. And yeah, this next one took place nighttime, which means that didn't go as planned. That was a total flub on their account, because Angie died at nighttime and Tenko's death was during the daylight. So yeah, it does not make a lot of it does not help that what Angie tried to set a curfew did not help her in the long run. It in fact got her killed. So yeah, eventually Tenko bites the dust in the daylight for different reasons and whatnot. But yeah, that is it for Angie's character. So now we have Miyu. Actually no, we're not done with Angie's character. We went through her free time events. But her free time events basically is a whole thing where she's lived a very happy life on an island, but she's never felt the scolding and whatnot, because she's obviously had Atua on her side. However, her case in her free time events is that she's actually really lonely. So she picked apart people and whatnot to get in her side and whatnot, like Himiko and the other student council members, but obviously within that she died to Korekio's hands. So yeah, let's move on to Miyu. Miyu is extremely vulgar. She talks a lot of shit. She does not care until she's eventually scolded at, to which she drops low. And so that's kind of part of her whole nervous wreck kind of mood to her. She has two sides to her. A whole bunch of crap speaking, and basically a frightened side that's only trying to do better. Within a very perverted mindset, not gonna lie, and which I could not get used to her character because of that. But she has a lot of character, and it's neat to see that. But I could not really get her appeal and whatnot. Aside from that, Miyu lives for quite a bit until chapter 4, when she eventually can't bring herself to trust the group to the point where she goes ahead to try to attempt murder on Kokichi. But that fails, and basically Gonta ends up killing her at the hands of Shuichi's mastermind. Now Shuichi's a very intelligent person, but we'll get onto him later. Now, yeah. Within that, we have Miyu's character development arc that really kind of ends there within her death in chapter 4, but she has a pretty neat arc and whatnot. Like, she eventually can't bring herself to trust the group, but she does build in build a lot of gadgets and whatnot, and she really is just lazy. She's super lazy due to a car accident that she got in within her coma, or got in, which eventually set her into a coma and whatnot. But all of her vulgar stuff and whatnot really kind of seems interesting, to say the least. Very much sex apathy kind of character, and Miyu just overall really likes Shuichi by the end of it, and because Shuichi prevents her from doing something that could kill her. So yeah, there's that. Aside from that point on in, we then have the the next point on display is, let's say, what is it? I think let's get on to our next character, which doesn't have much. Rentaro Amami. So Rentaro Amami plays a huge role in Chapter 6, but from that point on, he doesn't play a big role. He has kind of an overpowered talent because it gives him an overpowered perk and whatnot, which is the Ultimate Survivor. We don't know if Rentaro would necessarily be insanely good at trials. We do know he survived a class trial, and that in the end, he came out on top for his group and whatnot, and he became a sacrifice. He is probably pretty good at trials. He's calm, reserved, but that's because he knows he's in a that's because he has a bad feeling that he's in a killing game, and he's figured out the mastermind. But that is also due with, you know, either his good instincts or the survivor perk, because the survivor perk comes in pretty handy. He dies though, first chapter, and his survivor perk is taken, so he was just out gambited and whatnot, like Miyu was with Kokichi, and overall he lost to the mastermind this time. Basically his true talent, aside from the Ultimate Survivor, is the Ultimate Adventurer, which is a pretty neat talent. He's traveled across the world looking for his sisters and whatnot, but he's discovered amazing things on his way through. And he lost basically, I think, all of his sisters, all 12. And he has a really interesting kind of thing, and he's got a bit of backbone, you know, when he doesn't want to see people and wants to keep his distance between. But yeah, he unfortunately met his end within the mastermind, which originally thought that Kaede actually killed Rantaro, since Kaede was setting up a trap for Rantaro. So let's get on to Ryoma. So Ryoma unfortunately didn't have much of a character arc. He is a badass and whatnot, but unfortunately his fall is due to Kurumi. Kurumi really, in the end, probably didn't care much of the mastermind when it could be her own goal, because she fell to her motive path. But Ryoma was the ultimate tennis pro / ultimate prisoner, who died for killing the mafia and whatnot, who explains a lot of the tennis stuff and whatnot, who had a girlfriend who also died to the mafia. Unfortunately, he doesn't have much other than from there. He's a really cool character though, and I really like him. But I can't think myself to like him much as other characters because he didn't have much aside from that point from his free time events. So it's really kind of sad knowing that his character is generally a somber character, but he doesn't bring much because he died early. So Ryoma basically died because he figured out what his motive path was, that there was no one who cared for him, but it's not really true. There were people who cared for him, and it just seems like that was set up on purpose to get him killed due to the mastermind's glorious thinking and whatnot, as she has put in all the work into this. Well, not all of the work, to be honest. Let's be real. A lot of things seem out of place and suspicious to that end. But that'll be for Chapter 6's own video, for Danganronpa V3's own ending video. So yeah, he dies to the motive paths and whatnot, to the story and yeah. Kurumi is the culprit of this case. Kurumi killed for eventually her own gain to basically serve the whole country because she was the prime minister. However, she was willing to sacrifice the group for that, so they eventually came on ahead to having her sacrifice herself, as she tried to run away, but that didn't happen well out for her, so she died for killing Ryoma, which could have been very useful to us for someone that eventually fell to the motive videos, so she went ahead and died to her own descent. So yeah, next up we have the next few. We've already explained Angie, but let's talk about Tenko. Tenko was probably on the brink of a character development arc that unfortunately was lost to her dying. Due to Kurekyo's trap that he had set out for either him or for either her or Kimiko. He already killed Angie, and he could have gotten away with a potential unsolvable murder case because there was not much ground to it. But but despite all of that, he decides to go for another murder, which basically really does point him to the murder. And Kurekyo is caught by the group. But Tenko basically always cared for Himiko and whatnot and looked out for her safety. Even infiltrating the student council to be a fake member just to look after Himiko to make sure Angie didn't pull any bullshit. Considering that Tenko probably also didn't believe in the powers of the Necronomicon, and overall didn't believe in Atua itself. So she was basically kind of a whole spy for us. And overall a person we could trust. Even if she had a hatred toward males, that was all because she's very gullible to her master. And so, with her free time events and whatnot, she eventually comes to accepting Shuichi if, he masters new Aikido, or just gets a sex change and whatnot, But that sex change probably won't happen, and so. She had a character development arc that went on, which was pretty neat, and I liked it. If only we could go on for any further, but it eventually led to a death due to Kurekyo's trap and whatnot that he had set up for everyone. Which, bear by me, was one of the greatest traps and greatest murder methods that I think was out there and whatnot. Also the Necronomicon being possible and whatnot, it is possible that it is a real thing, but there's not much trustworthy to it to begin with. So, yeah, there's that. So, within that, Tenko's whole case of being within Himiko just to protect her and whatnot, to make sure that she doesn't step out of line on Angie's side, and just to watch over her. Like a sister, like a big sister. Which obviously starts off Himiko's big character development arc, and why Himiko eventually survives. So, we eventually get on to now Kurekyo. Kurekyo doesn't really have a character development arc. He's overall kind of a neat, complete, big complete character. Not fully complete, but pretty good on point. His motive is very weird. It's an incestual kind of thing that he kills for his sister and whatnot, who died, and he wanted to bring along the friends. That may have been an actual portrayal, though, to him, as he was eventually assaulted and killed and exorcised by his sister Monokuma. And so, that was potential betrayal. But his murder case is really cool, and overall he's very smart. Anthropology is a really neat thing overall, and I would like to look on it on its own. But Kurekyo teaches a neat little few things about it. Doesn't teach all the basics to it, but it's pretty neat in his free time events and whatnot. Even if he would end up wanting Shuichi to join over on his side to meet his sister, which is no thank you. Aside from that, we have the we next up have what is it? We next up have case 4's things. So next is Gonta. Gonta also doesn't really have a character development arc aside from chapter 4. When he realizes that what Shuichi blinded him with hit him with, to convince him was the flashback light that they found. However, that flashback light revealed the outside world, and that led Gonta to believe that a mercy kill was in need, so that he could end the killing game and just have himself survive out there, just for his friends. But that doesn't go into plan, and the case is found as Kokichi gets pissed off at Shuichi's tactics and whatnot, and eventually reveals the entire case just to bore the audience, which obviously doesn't do them. It obviously doesn't do numbers till the final to the 5th chapter, or the penultimate chapter before the final chapter. But yeah, Gonta is killed, unfortunately, but he's really neat, and he's one of my favorite characters. Gonta really does do himself some well and justice within the series and whatnot, and overall, he has he has a really neat thing to him. He's adorable and whatnot. His love for bugs is something that I can get into, because like I do play Animal Crossing a lot, so I have a bit of information on me. You know, I love the monarch butterflies. I there's also the peacock butterflies out there and whatnot. There's a lot of butterflies like common yellows or the monarch butterflies that I mentioned. And then the emperor butterflies. There's just a lot of cool things there. And yeah, there's a lot of neat little bugs out there. But Gonta's just adorable kind of dude who, while yeah, he isn't that smart outside of bugs and whatnot, he has morals, and it's really neat to know that Gonta, while I'm sad he went out the way he did, he truly had care in his heart for the group, and yeah, it's sad to see how he went. But I love Gonta, so yeah. I think now within that we headed on to chapter 5 with Kaito and Kokichi, two of some of the biggest characters who ended up paying the price and died. So, Kaito. Yeah, Kaito, while isn't ingrained of a character development arc, because he's basically a complete character and whatnot, he has one of the most memorable things to him and whatnot, and lives out for a long time. A virus that he got because the mastermind planted on him, basically making his survival for naught and whatnot. He just couldn't survive no matter what he could do and whatnot, unless he just decided to break his rules and kill someone. He goes out within sacrificing himself or by killing Kokichi, going along with his plan and dying in chapter 5 to his sickness and got his own victory. However, Kaito's character is basically there to help Maki and Shuichi get out of their shell and whatnot. He's there to basically help provide for them and whatnot, and to talk them of things, to basically know that their burdens aren't their own to carry and whatnot. He's really the best bro character of the series and whatnot, and that's why I love him. He's a very neat, knowing character, and I really do respect what he's there for his group. His sickness gets in the way, and even his own flaws are seen in his way. He's not the smartest in the class trials. He is all about the belief side and whatnot, which sucks because eventually that side is torn out. It still has some things into it, but you know, like to quote someone like Chiaki, belief without doubt is simply a lie. And while like, you know, those now fictional characters, I hate them when it's V3, but when it's V3, I hate him. But yeah, Danganronpa, like, Kaito really does pull in kind of all. He is the support man after Kaede's unfortunate death, due to what was really going behind the scenes within Kaede's mind. But Kaito really does help the group out and is the big leader kind of role. And Shuichi gets all of his strength from Kaito and whatnot, and Kaito is there to help him. So it's really neat to know that, you know, Kaito as a bro can be there for him. So within that, Kaito goes out like a bang with one of the best finishes in the series. He dies with a smile, with him dying in space, ruining Monokuma's execution, because he didn't die of despair. He died of pure happiness and satisfactory. And it's great to see him go out with a bang. And that eventually leads us to our final chapter and whatnot. But before, obviously, we got a couple characters to talk about. Kokichi. Kokichi is a liar. And Kokichi is a flawed character. Kokichi is not an S tier character. But he's a great character nonetheless. Kokichi really has this whole good alongside of him that he can't express because in the end he's just a lie fabricated. It's entirely beyond himself. There's just nothing else that he can really do. When he reveals the truth, it's awful. But when he lies, it's made out of kindness at times. But at other times, he can't find himself to really kind of like trust others because he is a very smart person. While I would say he could be really smart in class trials, he doesn't put that up. He's not very carry aside from chapter 4. Aside from chapter 4, he doesn't really do much except antagonize and not provide too much. Chapter 3, he's actually pretty helpful, but Shuichi yet again is there to finish it off and, be the main person in the trials, which is why I can't find much ground for him. I find Kokichi around the same size of Maki and Kaito, depending on who was the most helpful aside from Shuichi. It really is dependent on those three. Himiko also provides some nice helps. Even though she's not great at the things either, and she knows of that, she wants to know if she can provide helpfulness within evidence and whatnot. And while that's not very much seen well within the second chapter, it's seen a lot better within chapter 4 to 6 and whatnot, to see if Himiko is helpful, in which I think Himiko was pretty helpful. Considering that, Kokichi and Shuichi didn't know about the hidden passageway till chapter 6, because they're boys, so they didn't have much ground on Tsumugi, probably compared to Rentaro, who did have ground on Tsumugi, but they didn't. They couldn't figure out who it was until, well, Kokichi couldn't figure it out, and he eventually died. But Shuichi couldn't figure it out till the final chapter.
Delivery won't. Walmart Plus.
But within that, Kokichi is the embodiment of a lie. He is one of the most biggest characters in the series, but eventually he goes out with his own fate. While he isn't very useful in chapter 1, and while he probably got hit with his own Monokuma pad in chapter 2, he's very useful in those two regards in the class trials. Pretty useful in chapter 3, but within the motives of, the time limit in chapter 1, which he does nothing, Monokuma pads really, I think, got him, or the Monaco's pads got him. The Necronomicon, he wasn't a believer of it. Chapter 4, he saw what the motive was. He figured out the motive and just lied about it because he probably didn't really want to bring the group to seeing it until he had a plan scouted out for it, to which he saw the truth of the outside world. We don't know if Shuichi truly, felt lost in that outside world, but if he did, it was for a short period of time because he has gone mad from the revelation, and he himself probably was terrified of the whole thing, but he didn't want to bring the truth to the group until they eventually figured out. But he's already gone somewhat insane to that point. Well, insane in the case of a well-intentioned extremist. He may not be insane, but he certainly probably was just as confused as when the group initially saw the outside world for the first time. So yeah, though it all provided to be a fake, and Kokichi ran into the Mastermind's trap, and thus the Mastermind had him in his hands the whole time. It's just that it was unpredictable what he did, so he tried to provide something to get out of that trap, or at least try to set fire to that trap alongside with him. Unfortunately, it didn't work, and the Mastermind has too much power to be stopped in a sense like this. And it really sucks that Kokichi went out knowing that no matter what, his ideologies and what he was going to do was outsmarted. He may have outsmarted others, but he couldn't outsmart the Mastermind, and eventually Shuichi and the rest of the gang had to do it themselves. Something probably more bigger than what he did. It's sad, but it seems like Kokichi's things kind of went on pointless. Well, not really pointless. He definitely brought the group into a whole thing where now they are there to fight the Mastermind and end this killing game, but Kokichi wasn't there to witness it. It is sad for both Kaito and Kokichi. They died in chapter 5 due to things the Mastermind set up for them. They weren't going to make it any longer. But overall, they definitely had probably one of the most somber things. And it's really sad to see how they go. Overall, though, great characters and whatnot. And yeah, with how they are, with him being liars and whatnot, with Kokichi being a liar, and Kaito having, inferiority complex issues when it comes to people like Shuichi, when he admits that to Shuichi he was envious of Shuichi's power and saw how Shuichi was saving the group and all. It really does make Kaito a more bigger and complete character, and Kokichi's character really is kind of a thing of whether or not I wonder if Kokichi really just hated himself and used lies as a way to tell himself the own truth. The truth is in the eye of the beholder. So within that, we're gonna get on to Kaede. Yes, Kaede died in the first chapter. Yes, I don't like Kaede as much as I like Kaito and Kokichi. I think Kaede is a good character compared to the characters that Erika has voiced in the series. Definitely not as good as Kyoko. But Kaede is still a good character because she's a more complete. She's different than the rest of the gang and whatnot for how she is, and it would be interesting to see how her path would go if she lived instead of Shuichi. But as it kind of makes sense that Shuichi needed development. Shuichi really did need this character development because while he has the similarities to the other protagonists, he's very different. And how he starts out is very much different than what the other two have. The other two obviously don't like within themselves, but because Hajime doesn't remember who he is, he assumes he has a talent, which kind of doesn't bring him much more context, and we don't get much out of him until chapter 4 and beyond, which really kind of leaves him kind of stale for those first 8 chapters. Whilst Makoto, is basically left within his own issues and whatnot, and doesn't feel like he belongs in the group, but he does whatever, and we don't get much of a character development. Luckily, with Makoto, we get a big spike in his character development arc to see how he truly feels about himself in this Danganronpa 3, which I will count as my own if I ever do a character ranking. So yeah. Aside from that, yeah. I'm just muting. I'm just keeping the thing muted and whatnot. So yeah, Kaede is pretty much on the track of how she is basically already this really confident character that is down to earth, that is basically up into arms of stopping and defeating the mastermind as much as she can. Obviously, this goes horribly. This goes so horribly that it inflicts Kaede getting framed for pulling off a murder trap that didn't work, that was perfectly in Samugi's hands, and in the end, she was executed for a crime she didn't know that she thought she committed. It's sad. It really does suck, and I really hate that. But that's just what happens. She fell into the trap the mastermind plotted when the mastermind had all eyes over them, and she took the bait. She went for the mastermind, and in the end, she died. So yeah. Kaede was this complete character, being this piano freak who was confident and was basically the leader, which is what made Kaito and Kokichi basically kind of redundant in the first chapter. They didn't really have big purposes. Rentaro had a big purpose, and Shuichi had a big purpose, obviously. Kaede, Shuichi, and Rentaro were the 3 big characters of that chapter. And especially Shuichi, which we'll obviously talk about as our final character to discuss. And basically, the story is kind of being discussed alongside with this, within the motives and whatnot, and what the characters are feeling. But I'll explain more of the story after the characters. So, yeah, we have that alongside, and for what Danganronpa 1, or no, for what Danganronpa V3 has within Kaede is her whole thing about being this leader and whatnot. She has a big role in this chapter, and she has backbone too, like Hajime. The thing with her, though, is kind of the whole thing is whether or not we'll be able to predict what she would do for the rest of the story. We don't know if the story was really meant to be fit for her. Whether or not she was following the truth versus lies aspect, like Shuichi basically is all swooned over, or if she would continue the usual. I think she has the possibility of ending this killing game for good, like Shuichi, but we are unsure. We can't fully decide that because personality is way different than Shuichi's. So that's something we'll have to discuss on our own behalf. Whatever y'all think, y'all can say in the comments whether or not you think Kaede would end the killing games like Shuichi would for good, or if you think something different would happen. Y'all can just discuss that. I think that's possible for all the other protagonists and whatnot, even like someone like Makoto. I think Makoto would end the killing games for good if he had the choice. But like, I never say this, but Makoto probably does have the opportunity that he could continue Hope if he thinks it was the best path, but we don't know for certain if he would take that path. We don't know for certain the same with Hajime, and Kamara was never in a killing game and whatnot. She was more so in the outside world horror zone that wasn't really a killing game and whatnot. It was just killing. So yeah, yes, I took that from Himiko. But yeah, that's basically kind of Kaede's character. We definitely would have gotten more had she not gone out, but her death did save up for one of the best character development arcs in the series, and it was also one of the most somber and most beautiful chapters in the series. Probably one of the top 3 best chapters in all of Danganronpa. So yeah. Other than that, Kaede would have definitely gotten more character had she not died early to set up for Shuichi's path. So yeah, but I don't think was only just Shuichi's setup. I think she had much more to her than what people give credit to. So now, with that out of the way, we have the chapter 6 ones, and we will start off with Kibo. Kibo, yes, doesn't have much of a character development arc, but he is one of the best characters in my opinion. Kibo truly has this thing about him that sets him up for greatness. While I can't say he's S tier or not, I'm not fully decided on that yet, I still think he is a great character overall. Maybe tied with Kaito, or maybe above Kokichi. Who knows? But overall, Kibo doesn't have much, but he has one of the most interesting talents, the ultimate robot, who really is just portrayed as a robot as the most realistic as a human, which I think is what it had the talent going for in Kibo's case, is where he is a robot, but his technology is so advanced into the fact that he's just like any other human and whatnot. So yeah, that's really neat. Kibo's case is that he gets a little bit of a character relationship with Miyu, and you know, he treats Miyu well and whatnot. He has all these upgrades to him, and he is one of the last few characters that unfortunately dies last out of the group, along with another character. So Kibo gets kind of his full-on arc around chapter 5 and chapter 6, where within the air voice, he goes ahead and he basically gets answers from the audience survey, telling him what to do and whatnot, which he finds out the Hope revelation to. And eventually, you know, while he's convinced of Hope and whatnot, with how the final chapter goes and how Shuichi tells him that rejecting it would be the best answer, he eventually has to let go of that reasoning and basically understand that the inner voice was just using him. He was just being used like everyone else and whatnot. So yeah, it's sad, and eventually we go ahead to providing that Kibo basically goes ahead to accept the idea of killing or of ending the killing game for good by destroying the entire academy as the execution for everyone, and going alongside, since you know the killing game has ended, and within him and the inner voice, the audience votes to abstain from playing any more in the killing game by refusing to vote. And overall, basically Kibo goes out with one of the most saddest deaths, because a character we thought was going to live and whatnot that people probably really liked, unless you're a few people. You know, it's sad to see that he died. And overall, the chapter really did bring out some of the best moments in the series, maybe even the best chapter in the series. But it's really, really interesting to see how Kibo goes along with how in his free time events they go in, you know, Kibo and Shuichi are going in with ideas and whatnot to see how Kibo can create a business or whatnot and see what he can do. And they eventually end up like, you know, good friends. And it's really neat. So yeah, within that point, Kibo goes out with a bang after learning what he is and whatnot. So yeah, it's great to see that Kibo, you know, had a great character in the end. and overall, I really wish she survived. So, finally, the final character to die in this game is none other than one of the best characters in the series, in my opinion. One of the most scariest characters in the series, Tsumugi Shirogane. Tsumugi Shirogane, what I love about her is that she's a total geek. People find her forgettable because there's not much to her. How she stays in the background a lot of the time, how she is kind of a sane character, but really doesn't, do much. Well, yeah, until chapter 6, and her performance is one of the best performances in the series that I've seen. Her whole shtick of being the mastermind, being this eerie, obsessed fangirl that switches between the talents because her talent is finally put to the test and whatnot, and to which she showcases that her power as the ultimate cosplayer to just mimic others completely to the point where it's just scary. She's like a shapeshifter with cosplay. It's insanely sick of how that is, and it's dope to see how truly evil she can be and how truly scary that talent can be. There's a lot of endless possibilities with the ultimate cosplayer talent that I've noticed. So yeah, aside from that, she's a total geek, which I totally really like. I really like the whole geek aspect of her character. And I really do appreciate that she really has these neat little references. And I love cosplay too. Cosplay is great. I know others may be indifferent to it, but cosplay is just really, really cool, and I love it. So yeah, I agree with Tsumugi on that whole detail. But yeah, the whole thing within Tsumugi's kind of ideals and whatnot, and what she is, it really helps to know that, like, with how Danganronpa V3 is, and with her role as mastermind telling everything is fiction, everything is a lie. What I also like about her character is the fact that she's not perfect. She isn't really telling the truth at some points, and sometimes she has things so wrong, or things wrong, that like it seems pretty suspicious that she's saying all of this that can be proven wrong. And herself as a character, it makes it seem like maybe she's being controlled and whatnot, and that the real mastermind is somewhere out there. Whether or not you believe her and what she is and whatnot, the ending is up to interpretation, and that will be on its own video. Probably a 30-minute video at least, or something along the lines, because that definitely needs a whole video of its own discussing what it is. But you shall be prepared for that in the future. Anyways, so yeah, Tsumugi is one of my favorite characters because I think she's a great mastermind depicting of how she really can be. Her obsession makes her one of the most realistic characters and whatnot within the series and whatnot. And for reading off of TV tropes and whatnot, yeah, you can say that Tsumugi is us. We're not the audience, we're fucking Tsumugi. And that's even more creepier in detail. And yeah, overall, it's really neat to know that Tsumugi as a character, I think, is one of the most well done characters in terms of performance and whatnot. She may not have much of a backstory, but that's how she's planned to be this mastermind. But she has really cool free time events and whatnot, and she in and of itself is a really creepy character that I wouldn't want to be around with if I had to be told I was just fiction. So now we have every character who died finished up. So it's now time to talk about the last two characters. Particularly we have let's start off with Maki Harukawa. Now I'm gonna start with Maki Harukawa because while she does have a character development arc that starts in chapter 3, hers is kind of a more shorter distance between Shuichi and Himiko. Namely because their character arcs, while Himiko starts around chapter 3 to 4, she has a lot more to her in the other two chapters, while Maki is practically unseen in the first chapter, and chapter 2 she's kind of quiet until the final class trial, until her talent is revealed, which her character arc begins. So, Kaito Momota being the big reason behind her character development, or being a factor to it, alongside of her talent, alongside of how her peers are around with her, alongside of her backstory, She was raised in an orphanage, and she basically was picked by scouts that went ahead and went ahead and picked up for an ultimate assassin. She went through horrifying and terrible and torturous training just to make her who she is as the ultimate assassin, being basically dried off of emotions to become a stoic and whatnot. Obviously, though, kind of like in Kyoko's case, that's not really true. Her emotions are still there. Plenty of emotion can be hidden well if you are good about it. And in this case, Maki's emotion is fully shown in the finale of Chapter 5. But of course, Maki goes through to train with Shuichi and Kaito, being considering that Kaito picked up Shuichi first because Shuichi was in a rut after Kaede's death. Maki was picked up when her talent was revealed, and now everyone is suspicious of her, especially the student council, which Angie set up just to fret of her and whatnot. Because Angie wants to keep it real, wants to keep it in her own game, which obviously bites her back as Korekiyo fucking kills her. And yeah, Korekiyo ain't having any of it. Just to set up for his own means and whatnot. So yeah, Maki starts out with training and whatnot, but Kaito goes through a whole kind of scare and whatnot because while he has a sickness looming around him, it's also because the actual main factor of Chapter 3 is his hatred of ghosts. He's terrified of ghosts, so Maki has to deal with that. Maki and Shuichi kind of have to deal with that alongside the group. So they train together, they talk to each other about things. Maki has also an interesting story about how she botched the mission with a katana. She ended up finishing the mission successfully, but it was very much almost ruined because of what happened. And basically, with her going to a cosplay convention to kill the person, it was obvious that, they all assumed that she was dressing up as a cosplay and whatnot. But yeah, that didn't go as planned. But anyways, she basically has interesting stories about her being in the orphanage, being this assassin and whatnot, dealt to kill people she's assigned to, not because they're bad or good and whatnot. No, all because she's assigned to killing them, and she has to deal with it. So yeah, it's quite interesting seeing how that goes. My dogs are barking. Oh, my bad. But yeah, yeah, Maki goes through all the feelings and whatnot to the point of utter hatred of Kokichi in Chapter 5. She is up to the point where she wants to fucking absolutely kill him because she believes he's the mastermind. It gets into her head because not only is Kaito in danger, but she's full on belief that Kokichi is the mastermind, which was a trap that Tsumugi set up for her in the end. Tsumugi set up to do her own bidding just so that she can all watch it fall apart in Kokichi's eyes. So yeah. And Tsumugi got away with it. Tsumugi dealt the hand and had to be fully punished in the next chapter without Kokichi seeing any of it. So yeah, Maki goes through having to notice that not only did she think she killed, but she didn't kill Kaito, but Kaito went ahead and ended up putting carrying the blame for himself by letting him kill Kokichi so that Kokichi can get Maki away from being the culprit and whatnot, since he knows he'll blackmail Kaito because Kaito doesn't want that for Maki. So Kaito sacrifices himself to killing Kokichi, to ending the killing game, to saving Maki in case all goes wrong, in which, it goes wrong only because Shuichi solved it in the end. And it was at a point of no return no matter what Shuichi or Kaito did. So yeah, because Monokuma was convinced. After all, Monokuma didn't know the murder of Chapter 5, so he had to rely on the class to figure it out for him. So yeah, he ended up talking a lot more than you would expect him to talk. So, anyways, we are now going on ahead to moving in the final two chapters, or which Maki has to see Kaito go, and Maki is just absolutely torn, but has to live with the death to carry on Kaito's wishes and whatnot. As you know, Kaito went along with a bang and prevented dying from Monokuma's execution, and died in his own ways by dying to his sickness and whatnot. So, Maki's basically beliefs in there only start to really get torn apart when she is not only told she's fictional, but her relationship with Kaito and her hearing that Kaito's illness was put in alongside part of his character was because Samugi set that up for her. So yeah, Samugi is one fucking bitch. So I love her, but I still love her. Maki has to learn from that, but you know, her character arc finishes when she knows that she'll live within Kaito's words and how her feelings for Kaito won't change. So she goes along with Shuichi's takings and sacrifices herself. So that is Maki. Anyways, next up is Himiko. Himiko kind of starts off as a lazy character that starts off around chapter 2. Chapter 2 is when she hangs out with an Angie and whatnot to set up a magic show when she believes in the Tua. Obviously, a Tua may not be real after all, and she was believing in a con artist. My mouth. Holy hell. Anyways, I should get a drink. Do I have a drink here? No, I don't. I will be back. I'm gonna pause this. Alright, I got a drink. So, now. Within now we have Himiko, basically, who starts a magic show with an Angie. Himiko, provides her trick well and whatnot, or her magic, and, basically, for what happens is, not only does Ryoma die due to Kurumi's hands and her plan, and her being the Prime Minister, basically, she is suspected for that, even by Angie's hands and whatnot. So, basically, Himiko has to defend herself by telling her trick, but eventually Shuichi has to tell the trick and she has to confirm it. And so, we get on to the point where to which chapter 2 ends off, and you know, Himiko's trick is told, but none of her friends die and whatnot, which is Angie and Tenko. However, that does not bode well for her, as both Angie and Tenko die in chapter 3 because of Korekio, and you know, Korekio becomes the most hated person to Himiko, and Himiko sought revenge after the culprit of that case, to which, you know, she does technically get it, as Korekio dies. And yeah, he's exorcised. So yeah. Within that, what's next? Himiko goes ahead to basically has been called out for like Kokichi, you know, as Kokichi calls out of Himiko's expressions. Himiko doesn't express herself in chapter 1 and 2 because it's a pain and whatnot. She has so much things she doesn't want to do because she's incredibly lazy, which Tenko doesn't like seeing and whatnot. Which is why Tenko, I believe, is much more valuable to her than Angie. But yeah, Himiko really does kind of suffer quite a bit, but her her friends are there basically to help cheer her up. However, they bite the dust, and eventually, you know, Himiko being confronted again, this time is told in the act of kindness, really, in the fact that she should be mourning her best friend's deaths instead of just looking so saddened about it and not caring. So she lets it all out and whatnot because she's lonely. Without them, she's really lonely. Suspecting, also knowing that her master that she was taught by also ran away because, you know, he couldn't live with what happened to him. And Himiko ended up saving him, but he ran, so Himiko was just lonely for most of that time. And so yeah. Himiko obviously is now much more cheerful during the group, and she has one of the better character development arcs. Kind of learn about herself, and trying to make herself much more user, much more, expression. You know, that's what basically she kind of goes through and whatnot. However, by the point after. Okay, so first of all, I think a story point should be here is that Chapter 5, because of the reveal of the outside world, which was Kokichi's plan and whatnot, the group is so torn apart that they don't feel the need to even participate in the killing game anymore. Which obviously doesn't go well, as the flashback light revealing anything at Post Peak Academy ruins Kokichi's plan, so he has to come up with another plan. So yeah, within that, Himiko is also alongside of them, but really everyone else is kind of alongside of them, aside from Maki, which I've already explained. But yeah, Himiko goes ahead and basically, alongside of Maki, is horrified by the revelation and whatnot. While not too much of an extent, as when Maki is directly told that Kaito's feelings were fictional, or her feelings for Kaito were fictional, Himiko's feelings are basically the same within her friends. Her feelings are actually just fictional to them. But even though those feelings are real, and what they felt was real. And so, she joins alongside Shuichi to abstain from voting to put an end to this killing game and whatnot by, knowing that her friends' deaths are not in vain. And they were really the most important people to her, and really in the end they made her out to be someone who was much more cheerful and much more willing to put alongside her lazy attributes and whatnot, and in the end that is something that she will live on with. And so, ladies and gentlemen, because I'm not talking about the Monakas, not because they're bad characters, they're not bad characters, but they don't really have much, aside from memory loss, or pregnant stuff, Monokid bashing on Monodam being the logical one, Monosuke being all for the money. I'm not going to talk about them much, and I'm obviously not going to talk about Monokuma much, because, he's kind of self-explanatory. So yeah. Anyways, let's get ahead and let us go and now continue on with the final character, which is Shuichi Saihara. One of the best character development arcs in the series. Basically, Shuichi Saihara is our ultimate detective, and his whole kind of thing within his role is basically he doesn't like his job. He doesn't like his talent. He doesn't believe himself to be the ultimate detective. Rather, he's an apprentice and whatnot. And kind of in ways, I know we go back on someone like Kyoko, which people find Kyoko amazing at her job because, she's able to solve the cases pretty easily. She's very much used to it, and she lived through kind of a pretty painful story, but she did live with a character known as Yue and others, to be alongside, and Yue was basically her babysitter and whatnot, or her guardian and whatnot, after her father left her and her mother died. The difference in between these two is that while Kyoko is really good in a Danganronpa killing game setting, like she's one of the most trusted aspects, she didn't get that much leverage in the class trials, because even if she were someone as super smart and she's one of the most trusted people by the future after the killing game, during her killing game that she was a part in, Makoto was the most trusted because he was the most passive. So everyone put their needs to him really to solve the case. So yeah, she gave him lots of helpful and tried to cheer him up in cases where he didn't find himself as useful and whatnot. And, he basically did all the talking and whatnot for the class. It's seen a lot in Chapter 2 and whatnot in that game. Shuichi, however, is not only the detective, but is very passive, and he is the most trusted in the class trials. And so, finally, for the first time in Danganronpa, we finally play as a detective as our main protagonist, and it fits because the theme is truth versus lies. What would fit most with that? A detective. So yeah, we play as Shuichi, and it's really neat. So yeah, now within that, Shuichi starts off really hating of himself. He can be super smart as provided in chapter 1 and can solve things very easily, but by the time Kaede dies after he learns the horrifying realization that Kaede may have committed the crime and whatnot, and considering that all the evidence pointed towards her, he had no choice but to vote her, because even if Samugi was the culprit, there was evidence that was stored away from them that they could not point towards him. So there was no way of getting Samugi out of line. Samugi basically got away with it until the final chapter. But yeah, Shuichi Saihara is one of Shuichi Saihara. Basically, character development starts basically at chapter 1 and also continues on for the rest of the game. He is the most developed character in this game and whatnot, due to how he is. You may argue that Kaede was just developed better because she was developed really well from the start. It seems a little too much of a character. That Shuichi just seems really much better for a scenario like this than Truth and Lies. I know people may not like the Truth versus Lies debate, whole thing over it. They may consider it really weak compared to the other things and think that Hope versus Despair or Future versus Past is just better setting for a game like this. Truth versus Lies is a really interesting theme. So yeah, overall, I have no problems with it, and Shuichi seems very well fitting for something like that. So yeah, within that, Shuichi Saihara's character in Danganronpa V3 is helped alongside with Kaito Momotsa starting from chapter 2. Kaito from Momotsa is there to help Shuichi regain the confidence in himself to make it to where Shuichi doesn't have to worry about having the burden carried along his side because Kaito is there for him. There are people there for Shuichi that can take the burden as well. And Shuichi doesn't have to worry about it all on his own just to get the culprits out and whatnot, just to leave them to their death. Because he is there to help save them and the group wants to survive. Yeah, the Blacken wants to survive too. The Blacken wants to live on longer, so yeah. We can't necessarily say that the people want to survive because the Blacken also wants to survive. So yeah, be it that as you may, the Blacken does kill for a reason, that they want to survive. So yeah, basically, with how Danganronpa 1, with how Danganronpa V3 is with Shuichi, basically, he goes through all of it trying to, he goes through all of it with the help of Kaito Momotsa, Maki Harukawa, Kokichi Oma, a bit of Tenko, a bit of Himiko, and Kibo. Those are the characters that put their most help within him and whatnot, that try to be useful to him. And so, also a bit of Miyu, but Miyu eventually, being the shit talker she is. Yeah. So, Shuichi, starting on from chapter 2, gets a lot of help from Kaito to the point where he eventually points the crime to Karumi when Kaito has his back, because Kaito is best boy, or best bro. And, Kaito basically helps alongside of Shuichi. So, Shuichi goes through basically chapter 2 having to explain that he still feels guilty that Kaede was sentenced to death because of him, but Kaito tells him to not worry about it, that's not what Kaede would want. I mean, after all, Kaito punched Shuichi in chapter 1 because he noticed Shuichi was being all blaming himself and whatnot, so Kaito wanted to snap him out of it. And so, yeah, his motive and whatnot, him taking off his hat, his motive to continue on to help the others end this killing game is thanks to the people around him. So yeah, alongside of that, Danganronpa, or no, Shuichi. I keep saying Danganronpa. I'm trying to like get a. I'm trying to like bring myself back into this whole thing. But yeah, Shuichi continues on within himself, or into chapter 3, to which he is on the side of the others who don't believe that the Necronomicon can work, that he believes that all those people who died for real. And yeah, you know, they definitely died for real, but with what can be pulled off, they may be able to bring back a certain person, they just have to figure out how. So yeah, within that, we have to basically, what is it? What we have next is that Shuichi goes ahead to take sides within that group and hangs around with Maki Harukawa during her start of her character development. They don't have much that they go at with until chapter 4 and whatnot, but Maki obviously, you know, Maki obviously making or poking fun at him and teasing him and whatnot within his own ultimate detective talent. It's actually seen in chapter 2 when, you know, he mentions he's an apprentice and Maki brutally roasts him to a reaction we get to see and whatnot. So yeah, um, within all of that, it's helpful that Shuichi goes ahead within that point, and he goes through chapter 3 like normal within Kaito being scared of ghosts, him hanging with Maki during training still and whatnot, them having to deal with the student council, and him getting, you know, a lesson from Tenko about how she notices his self-esteem is low and he guilts himself a lot. And she tells him to basically kind of, you can manage from this and you can move on from this if you just look after other people. And you also look after yourself and whatnot. So yeah, Shuichi gets a hold of that and whatnot. So, from within that, we have the next point, which is chapter 4, which it really gets kind of interesting. Considering that Himiko and Maki have their start in that chapter in chapter 3, so Shuichi's arc isn't seen too much in chapter 3, but overall he's there to do his best and whatnot. Chapter 4 is where things get real. And it gets dicey. Because in chapter 4, when it comes to the murder trial this time, and you know, Shuichi hanging with Maki and Kaito, since we now know that Kaito's got a sickness to him, basically the group Kaito kind of doesn't exercise as much as Shuichi and Maki, to the point where he just says that they should just talk and whatnot. This is where we obviously learn about Maki and whatnot, so it isn't much about Shuichi. But obviously, it's kind of this gang of a trio where Shuichi is feeling more kind of happy alongside the group. Well, that would be the case if it weren't for, you know, let's say Kokichi Ouma, for basically saying that Shuichi should no longer hang with Kaito. Obviously, this does not go as planned for Kokichi, as he wants someone who's smart and someone who can work alongside him ending the killing game, but that doesn't go out in his favor. And obviously, Shuichi has to do it on his own terms. And so, what basically kind of happens here is that because of how this case goes and how Kaito's acts and whatnot, he acts quite betrayed and annoyed when Shuichi has to basically break it to Kaito that he has to stay on the side of logic and basically tell Kaito that belief won't save them there, and that he has to point to the true culprit of the case, Gonta Gokahara, and so Shuichi has to suspect Gonta, which breaks Kaito's heart and whatnot. And Kaito can't do anything but just have to take it there because now the rest of the group votes Gonta, and I think that vote to Kokichi is Kaito himself. So yeah, with how it goes is that Kokichi and whatnot is there in ahead, basically establishing himself as the antagonist and whatnot, or the secondary antagonist of the show, before we get onto our real antagonist being the mastermind. And, huh? Alright, alright, I'll be back real quick, so yeah. Enjoy your time here. Okay, I'm back. Okay, let's continue. So, last time we left off on chapter 4. Okay, but yeah, this is the point where all things went to hell. Because once we went to the virtual world and whatnot, Kokichi committed his murder. Kaito got really upset that Shuichi wasn't siding with him and was going for the truth, which I believe is basically influence on Kaede, because Kaede would rather want Shuichi to push for the truth, but I think is more influence that Shuichi took that into stride within chapter 5 before, he tried listening in on Kaito, because, there's a lot of influences in this game, and Kaede is one of Shuichi's influences, so it would make sense if he listened to Kaede's voice rather than Kaito's. So yeah. But yeah, that created a split between Shuichi and Kaito, and it went on until until before the murder of chapter 5, when Shuichi went ahead, continuing his character development after the Hope Speak flashback and whatnot, went ahead and met with Kaito through the window. And Kaito forgave Shuichi, Kaito said Shuichi should just forget about the whole Gonta thing and whatnot and continue to live on and whatnot, and that Kaito would do something on his own to try to help them, which obviously didn't work out, but more so, it could have worked out, but someone got in the way, so yeah. And so Shuichi went ahead to continue doing his usual investigation and whatnot through some of his more higher and whatnot, after noticing that Kaito may be dead due to this case and whatnot, which in truth was not the case. Kaito was the killer and the / culprit of the case. And Shuichi went ahead to solve it, ruining Kokichi and Kaito's plan. But Kaito didn't care, because he would be fine if Shuichi solved it to go for the truth. In the case, he was still listening to Kaede's words. Because, Kaede's words was, solve, no matter what, you should face the truth, no matter how hard it is. And that's different from what Kaito believes in and whatnot. That's different from what Kokichi wants. That is different from what a lot of characters would rather want. Kaede wants the truth. So, Kokichi, or Shuichi may have listened to that during the chapter 5. We're kind of unsure. But I think it's a good influence and something to back up on, like, Shuichi waiting until he actually got in on Kaito's whole schmicks, but it didn't matter. And so, now, the next thing in line that I want to talk about, the next thing I want to talk is now, actually no, the next part of Shuichi's character development after chapter 5, since, they say goodbye to Kaito, is chapter 6. This is where a lot of the things go in hand. While there isn't actually too much in here, it is quite interesting that, particularly how all these flashback lights kind of bring our character Shuichi into all these things and whatnot that he has to face and whatnot. While it isn't necessary development for his character, it definitely leads up to one of the biggest, greatest things a protagonist has done in this game. And that is during the final trial of V3. I'll get more in depth in the final trial of V3, but I'll explain. Since everything was fiction in V3, and that all the characters are left with just sorrow in their eyes, or just sorrow, despairing in the fact that this revelation being much more horrifying compared to something like the actual world being destroyed or whatnot, but rather it's quite sad that where they are may not even where they are and whatnot, and how they're fictional characters, it really does break them. It mostly breaks Shuichi the most, and Shuichi's realization upon this kind of really breaks. But once he's hearing that even more of his friends are to be sacrificed and whatnot, he plans to put a stop to that, and instead, what he plans to do is just die along with his friends to end the killing game to prevent any more lives from being sacrificed in the killing game for the entertainment. And obviously, you know, being known that he was a person that auditioned to be in the killing game, if it's true, we don't know exactly. This ending's up to interpretation. But if that's the case, then Shuichi basically kind of lived up to his name. He would create the greatest destruction of all time, and that would be he would create the greatest murder of all time. And to quote TV tropes, he murdered Danganronpa. He ended Danganronpa, basically. Him and his classmates ended Danganronpa by making it so boring that everyone in the audience no longer liked Danganronpa. And so Danganronpa ends. Obviously if it's any true that that was the real audience. Yeah, it's the audience of the actual Danganronpa world. It'd be interesting if it was that way. But then we'd have to think about the implications that would mean. And that probably wouldn't be a good reason as of to why. So yeah, overall, Shuichi ends Danganronpa by rejecting both hope and despair, and basically saying that the feelings that we all have from this fiction are real, and that the people that we care about is what we truly, truly want. We don't want murder games, or they don't want any more murder games. They want happiness with their friends. And so, within that, Shuichi's character arc kind of becomes an end once Chapter 6 is over, as to the whole fictional business of Chapter 6, which we'll go more into depth for. We've explained quite a bit of the story within the characters themselves, so yeah, I guess it's a one-on-one thing. But being explaining the story on its own would also have me talk about the characters and whatnot. So, with that, we go to the epilogue. So, within this ad, whatnot, but yeah. The epilogue. So, I know the epilogue makes a lot of people mad, but I think it's something good to end off. Yeah, seeing that the audience may want, seeing that it may be better, seeing that people may find it better that if everyone just were to die and whatnot, which we thought we all got. What the audience of this world also wanted was to have everyone left over that didn't die survive. And that was Maki, Shuichi, and Himiko. They didn't know about it till they eventually woke up, but it's possible that the audience wanted these guys to survive. And that's really special. It's really heartwarming. They talk about the possibilities of what Samugi's saying were lies, and that the possibilities of Hope's Peak Academy and the Remnants of Despair being real. And obviously that is up for interpretation, which I will explain in a video of its own about Danganronpa V3's ending. And I shall say it, Danganronpa V3's ending is the best ending of the series. It's so beautiful, and it's so interesting. It's so neat. As much as Hope and Despair can be good, and how much Future can be good as well, this seems so much more meaningful when we take a look into what Shuichi and the gang say, as fiction can change the world. Fiction can affect reality. I think that's belief. I think that's true. And I really do appreciate that. Overall, the epilogue may be tied in with the ending and whatnot, but yeah. Should the story not be over, it would be interesting to see where it go. They may just end it off here. I know there is Danganronpa S, so they aren't finished with Danganronpa, clearly. But we don't know what direction they're going. Danganronpa is still up in the air. We just know, though, that they may still care for it. They just need more time. They need more time to kind of let this simmer. They need time to understand where they're going to go with this. Either they make a whole hard reboot, or they continue off. Or they just leave it with V3 to end. And maybe they give us some background with not a killing game, but with an aftermath of what happened to these characters or to what Hope's Peak Academy is. Because let's be honest, Danganronpa 3 the anime doesn't do a good job at showing what happened to our characters. We just see Hope's Peak is rebuilt. We see the final frame of Makoto probably getting ready to meet people. Makoto's the headmaster because Kyoko was teasing him and being. I know that it's not confirmed, but Nagiri seems to have a lot of pointers to maybe prove that it is indeed real. We're just not sure yet. And I know shipping is not liked. I don't really like when shipping else. I just think I'm just a basic motherfucker. I like seeing couples get together or people get together. But aside from that, that ending has nothing, has no redemption against something like this. A truly beautiful, not hopeful, a truly beautiful ending, such as this, because it leaves theory crafting. I love an ending like this because I now can just create theories in my own head, seeing what could happen, what is real, what is not real, what is a truth, what is a lie. This ending and this game is easily my favorite in the series. It is so refreshing to get a game that really kind of dives well into how humanity can be, how humanity faces with their own struggles. That's not what 1 and 2 gave me. 1 and 2 gave me hardships and characters that I care about, but a message, and the messages that were given, they're big, but they're not as big as what V3 gives. V3 gives a huge message, and it doesn't make any of the 2 games meaningless. No, they say that that fiction that we played affected us. We wanted to see more. We wanted to see the characters live on. We wanted to see what they would do in the future. And that is what Danganronpa V3 does. That's what Danganronpa V3 gives me, the feeling of excitement to know that these characters I really like. To know that I really appreciate these characters. And most of this cast really does give me that feeling of happiness. It's we don't know where Shuichi, Maki, and Himiko are heading, but wherever they're heading, I hope them safe travels. And I really do like these characters, especially Shuichi. Depending on how I feel about it, Shuichi may be my favorite, or if not one of my most, or one of my most favorite, or if not my most favorite character in the series. But other than that, I'm getting too deep into it. Anyways, thank you so much for coming by on this lovely day of Dawn with V3 Killing Harmony. That is my closing thoughts on it. I really did enjoy this entry. I still think there are flaws within this game. I still think there could be some things fixed up for the future maybe. But overall, I really appreciate a game like this. Thank you all so much for coming by on this lovely day of this lovely bunker. Peace, peeps.